Welcome to Stories of Hope. This is a podcast by the Dream Center.
Where you will hear from people who have stories that once seemed hopeless.
People whose stories of redemption and life transformation are so powerful, they can only be possible by the power of Jesus. Hey everybody, welcome back to Stories of Hope. My name is Brady, one of our hosts, and this is Sarah, who is with me as always. And today we're joined by Destiny. She is our Easley Store manager, and she is somebody super near and dear to the Dream Center, and to me, and to Sarah, and to Tanya, who's over there off camera. We'll give her a little shout out since she's here. And I'm just so excited that you're here and that you said yes. And I know you've done this before, and I know that it's going to be a good time.
Well, this is a little bit different, but I'm honored to do this. So.
Yes. Last time you did it was probably in the dark backstage in the auditorium.
It was actually, yes.
And not like this at all. So it's much different, but super excited for you to get to tell your story again and kind of just talk through what the Lord's been doing in your heart. And so how did your journey with the Dream Center begin?
So I guess I need to start at the beginning, and I was a resident of the Opportunity Village in 2019, so I got to come and stay in the tiny home village for a year and rebuild my entire life, which was amazing. And then the day after I graduated from Opportunity Village, Chris had offered me a job in Project Sew, and so I got to learn how to sew as a resident, and then after I graduated, I got to teach the classes, so that was super fun.
Yeah.
I also worked in Shine Soup Kitchen. Before I graduated, about 6 months into the program, I started that. So I served the homeless down there 3 nights a week. And then I was able to get my peer support license through Favor, and was the peer support specialist for the residents, as well as resident manager.
Yeah.
And then when I had graduated the program, I was living in transitional, and the Lord just started restoring my family. So like my son had came to live with me in the transitional home. And so I went to Chris and I was like, hey, I'm putting in my 2-week notice. Because the schedule with resident manager is crazy. You know that. Yeah. And so I just needed time with my family. Yeah. And so it was such a God thing though, because Chris was like, so you're going to quit and you have no plan and you're in transitional? And I'm like, yeah.
This sounds
great.
Like
the Lord told me that I needed to be with my family, and so that's what I got to do, Chris, But then she goes, well, Elaine Vaughn put in her 2-week notice at the Easley store. Because I had planned because I was like, Chris, do you have anything like at the store or whatever? And she said that Elaine had just put in her 2-week notice, and so I went there in January of 2022 and took the assistant manager job that Elaine was leaving. So I just thought that was so cool how that all worked out for me, Yeah. And so I've been at the store since then, and I just absolutely love it. Now I'm the manager, and so it's awesome.
Crushing.
It's awesome.
It's an amazing job.
Yeah.
Also pretty cool to see even right away, like the Lord's faithfulness in providing something for you when you were listening to him and wanting to be with your family and taking like a risk of, I don't know what's next, but I know this is where I need to be. And then he said, here you go. I got you, which is really cool. So I love that we get some of that right away.
Yeah. That was, that was super hard for me to go to Chris Wilson and be like, I mean, after all the Dream Center had done, you know, but that's what the Lord had called me to do. So that's what I did. But
I also think it's a beautiful picture of like what our goal in our mission is like you got to a place where even though it was scary, like you were willing to take a risk and step out to something new, and not like crutch isn't the right word, but just like lean into the Dream Center just being like the only thing holding you up. You're like, I got this. Yeah. And now, thankfully it worked out to where you're still here. I know that like truly, it's just one of those things where
it had to be God. I mean, it was God.
Had to. It's beautiful. So that's awesome. So, okay, well, obviously podcast being called Stories of Hope, and kind of just, we get this beautiful opportunity to sit down with so many amazing people and talk about testimony, what the Lord has done in their life. And I know your story is beautiful and ongoing. And so we'd love to just kind of dig in and dive into some of that with you just a little bit and hear some of that.
Yeah. So, I was born in North Carolina in 1981. We grew up pretty poor. It was always like a single wide trailer.
Right.
My parents, I mean, they were not bad people, but I just think that they come from a generation who wasn't willing to talk about anything, and so
Right.
there was no healing there. And they were also just very preoccupied with their own lives and like what they were trying to do and hide and
Right.
all of those things. So I just like to preface with my parents were not bad people, but they were preoccupied and unhealed.
Right.
And so we were poor. They didn't teach us kids like the Word of God or anything. My dad was an alcoholic. He was an alcoholic and he was a gambler. So like he would quit the alcohol for a little while and then he would spend all his paycheck at the
Right.
gambling or whatever. So my mom, she dabbled in drugs. Like she would smoke weed. She smoked weed my whole life and did her Valiums. But like we were never hungry, you know, like, and there was always, my mom, back to my mom, I need you to edit that part.
Gotcha.
So my mom did, her Valiums and weed, and then she also always had like an extra relationship. So like she was always cheating on my dad.
Right.
And so she introduced me to like her boyfriend when I was little, and I was totally confused by that.
Right.
It's like I'm a little girl, I have my mom and my dad, and then there's this other person that my dad
Yeah.
has no idea about. It was just very confusing for me. And then so I had four half brothers, 4 step brothers from my dad, and I guess I was around the age of 4. I was sexually abused by a family member, by one of the brothers. And when I told my mom and dad, they just swept it under the rug like they did everything else. So like the cheating, the alcoholism, my sexual abuse as a child, like all of that was never brought to the surface. There was no resolve.
Right.
There was always a bunch of arguments and chaos in my household, but nothing like, no resolve in the household, no communication at all. And so I learned that from a very young age, just to ignore how I was feeling, just to lie about it or hide it and sweep it under the rug, and just never face it.
Yeah.
The sexual abuse taught me that I was worthless, that I wasn't very important, because when I told my mom and dad, nothing was done.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that was like there was no police report. There was nothing ever brought up about it again. But we did move. We moved to South Carolina because at the time we were living in North Carolina. So maybe that was their way of protecting me. I don't know. Fast forward, so my childhood was pretty chaotic. Like it was just always arguments and a bunch of crap inside my house.
Right.
And then at 13, my mom and dad finally separated for good. My dad, now mind you, I was a daddy's girl, no matter like what was going on within the household. Even though he was an alcoholic, I loved my dad. And at the age of 13, they finally separated, and my dad went to North Carolina and continued drinking himself into oblivion. Throughout my entire teenage years and young adulthood, he never reached out. So that left me with abandonment.
Yeah.
So already at 13 years old,
Right. Yeah.
my worth and I feel abandoned, you know. And so Satan used that, and I still struggle with that into my adulthood. Even though I've went through programs and recoveries and all of that stuff, I still struggle with those things. And so he goes to North Carolina. My mom continues her relationship with the man that she's seeing behind my dad's back. And I just kind of got lost, I think. I never felt really comfortable in my own skin. I never knew who I was. I never had anybody pouring into me as a child. And so I hate this part because I feel like it's like poor me, but that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that at all. But as a child, it does something to you. So at 13, I start looking for anything that will help me, like that will fulfill me,
Right.
and make me feel special and wanted. And so at 13 years old, I lost my virginity in a field behind my mom's trailer. And from that point on, it was like relationship after relationship after relationship. One would end and immediately I would be in another, because that's how I got my worth and my value. And I thought that that's what love was, you know.
Right.
And so 13 on, I'm being promiscuous. I start using weed at 13. It becomes like a daily thing around 15. I'm getting high before school, after school. Like, that was my whole thing. But I wouldn't call that an addiction, you know, because it doesn't take you way off the cliff or whatever. But it was definitely something that I leaned on continuously. And so late teenage years, I did graduate high school somehow, but got into the rave scene when it came through Greenville, and started going to all the raves that came to town, the Millennium, and it was just crazy. That was a fun part of my life, though, I have to say that. It was fun. Because that's a whole culture. If y'all don't know about the rave scene, like, these people are awesome.
I had some friends in high school who were all about it.
And it's still a huge thing. It's just different now.
Very.
Like, back then it was warehouses and stuff, you know? Now it's like festivals. But anyway.
It's incredible. I love that.
So I did that for about 3 years. That's why I worked, so I could buy my rolls and my acid, and I could go to these all-night dance parties and be with people who made me feel loved, you know. Okay, and so about the age of 24, I had my first child, Jaden, and that same year I started drinking. And when I tell you, from the first drink, I was addicted to alcohol. So, like, the first time I got drunk, I loved it. Like, it made me feel outgoing, and it made me feel like I was fun. And what it did for me, though, was it made me 10 times more promiscuous than what I was naturally. Like, even early teenage years, when I thought that's what love was and all that. And so I became a full-blown alcoholic, just like my dad. I left the guy that I was with, my son's dad, so that I could go to clubs after work every night and go. I mean, Chiefs and Easley, when Chiefs was in Easley, I used to go there. All the bars Easley used to have like 6 bars. I don't know if you guys, like, just in this vicinity, down 123. Made a complete fool out of myself. But during this time, because alcohol made me take off my clothes, I had to have 2 abortions. And for anybody that's listening to that, like, they don't tell you, like, what you deal with your whole entire life after that, you know. Then for me, I felt like I was grateful for them, because I wasn't going to be tied down to a child, and but now I regret it every day of my life. And so when I get to heaven, I'll have 2 little boys up there, or 2 children up there. I say boys because I have 3. So after that, I pretty much just hated myself even more, and so I drank even more. And by 2007, I had 3 DUIs, no license, had 2 abortions. And so the guy, my son's dad, who I had left to pursue alcohol, I went back to him and married him in 2007. And we'll just say his name is Brian. So I had my second son in 2007, and then I had my third son in 2008. And in 2008, my whole life completely fell apart, and my family was devastated. And this part of my story, I always preface with, later on in my story, you're going to be tempted to judge me, and some people will, and that's okay, because the Lord has redeemed it. But, so Brian, I was with Brian in 2008, and we had gotten married, and he worked. I worked at the Waffle House during the day, and he worked at Copper River at night, so that we would not have to pay for childcare because it's expensive. And one day I came home, and I was taking care of the kids, and my youngest son was twitching. He was 28 days old, and I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea. And so when Brian got home, I told him. I went on to bed because I had been drinking, if I'm just being completely honest.
Yeah.
And when I woke up to my neighbor telling me that Brian had taken Langdon to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get to the hospital, and I find out that he's got fractures on his brain, 3 broken ribs, and both of his legs are broken. And I was in complete shock. Plus, I was a little hungover, and I just didn't know what to make of it, and I was completely naive. Like, I would not ever think that the man that I had married, or anybody for that matter, would do something like that to a child.
Right.
And so, Landon's in the hospital. I go to the detective's office the next day because they want to talk to me, obviously.
Yeah.
And I did lie to the detectives. I told them that me and Brian's marriage, because then I was in denial. I had no idea what recovery or a different way of living was, or like the goodness of God. I had no idea. I was lost. And so I just told them, like, no, our marriage is great, and so that made them look at me like I was a liar, which is understandable. Anyway, so I go in and I start talking to the detectives, and the only thing I can tell them is I don't know. I don't know what happened to my child, and that's not acceptable. To them, it's just not acceptable.
Right.
I'm his mom. And so they charged me with child abuse, took me to Spartanburg County, and I lost my mind. I didn't have faith. I just didn't know what to make of it all. And so I'm sitting there. The very next day, they come and get me out of the cell, take me back to the detective's office, and tell me that Brian had confessed. Mind you, Brian was there the entire day with me, that they're interrogating me. And so, but they wanted to keep me to do their investigation, of course. So I ended up staying at Spartanburg County for 70 days. My kids were emergency taken into DSS custody. My mom ended up getting them about halfway through my jail, 70 days in jail, which helped me a lot while I was in there. But I don't know. That experience literally broke me. Like, I was not the same person after that.
Right.
So I ended up getting out after 70 days on a PR bond, and I did the entire DSS treatment plan, which was drug counseling, parenting classes, psych evaluation, like all these things that I had to do.
Right.
And so I completed that within 6 months, and I was able to be around my children and get custody again, which was great. Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. But I wish that I could say that, like, I was the best mom after that. But I can't say that. Like, I went right back to what comforted me and what helped me with my desires.
Right.
And began drinking again. And I just went off the deep. I would leave them for days with my mom. I lost like $1,000 one time. I've woken up in ditches. I would binge drink, so I would start drinking and I couldn't stop for like a week or so, and then I would come to and I'd go back home and I'd be so sorry. And I just put my mom and my kids through so much back then. I miss my kids' birthdays.
Hmm.
And then I met a guy who showed me what methadone was.
Hmm.
And so I stopped drinking so much, and he worked out of town. So, like, when he was in town, I would do methadone, so I'd be nodded out on my mom's couch. And then when he would go back out of town for work, I would be drunk the whole time. I was just so selfish. And then after him, I jumped into a relationship with my first love, who, you know, used to take me to the raves and stuff. And I married him, and he introduced me to methamphetamine shortly after we were married. And so, just like with alcohol, with meth, I was completely and utterly overtaken the first hit that I ever took of methamphetamine.
Right.
And mind you, my children are with my mom this entire time. And all they want is their mom. So I would leave them for days again to go cook meth, to go get meth, meth was my God.
Right.
Meth is what I lived for, is what I did. Anything that I was doing in my life at the time, I did it for the next hit of meth. And ended up that my mom had a heart attack during all of this, and so her health was diminishing. I couldn't get myself together, and so I asked Brian's mom. Oh, by the way, Brian got 13 years from the incident in 2008. And so I asked Brian's mom, because Brian was not there in the household, if she could take my boys while I tried to get better or whatever. What really ended up happening was that they went to her house, and I was so overtaken by my addiction that I just continued to get high, and especially with my boys aren't there, so
Right.
I had no grounding.
No, you're good.
Okay, where am I at? Meth. Okay. So the next few years were just really, really, really dark. Like, I really don't even know how I could describe it.
Right.
To where you guys could understand it if you've never lived that life. But I was around people that would as soon kill me than look at me. I mean, these were bad people. I like to say I was never a dope whore, but I was, because I sold, my family and my children, and just so that I could go get high. But in and out of jail, I caught my burglary charge during those years. Several like paraphernalia and little charges. In and out of Spartanburg County Jail. 2015, I was living in a abandoned trailer with no power, no water, in Spartanburg, cooking meth so that I could survive and get high. And they busted in the door while we were cooking 2 bottles of methamphetamine. They arrested us, and I was facing like 35 years for improper disposal, manufacturing, possession, distribution, all the
right.
charges. So 35 years. But whenever they arrested me, I was so relieved, because I felt so trapped when I was on meth. Like, you get high and you have to stay high because you're trying to make more, and like, it's just a whole ridiculous, awful, miserable existence.
Right.
And so when they put the cuffs on me, I literally was like, thank you, God, inside my head. And I think that was one of the only times I ever even recognized that there was a God that existed. And so they take me to jail. And I mean, I was so hopeless at the time, but I was also so thankful and relieved that I had went somewhere where at least I'm going to get 3 meals a day. At least I'm going to be, safe and warm, and I'm going to have power. And like, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we live in America, and you're thankful for the base,
Yeah, right.
So anyway, I lay down and I sleep for about 2 weeks straight. Now this next part's pretty crazy. I think it's pretty crazy anyway, but I did not call out to Jesus. Like, I did not surrender my life to Jesus. What happened was I went to sleep after being up for like a year straight on meth. And it felt like 2 weeks. I mean, I just would I would get up and eat and then go right back to sleep in my bunk. But when I woke up, it was like my perspective had changed. I wouldn't say that my whole heart had and I'm like, knew exactly, because I had no idea what was going on. But my perspective, my wants, my desires started to change. And so I stayed 8 months in jail. And while I was there, I started going to NA meetings that they held. I started going to the chapel. I even joined this program called Operation Educate, where they would allow me to get like a certificate while I was in there. So I got office administration while I was in Spartanburg County Jail, certificate, and then afterwards I had to go to rehab, which is what I did. And so...
It's probably Jason.
Is that going to mess anything up?
Oh, well, you'll hear it for sure, but that's fine.
Okay.
Little guest appearance by Jason.
Love Jason.
That's so funny.
Yeah, love him. So I did all those things. I did the Operation Educate program, and went before the judge 8 months later, and he gave me 4 years probation instead of 35 years.
Jeez.
Oh.
As long as I got out, went to rehab, and did all the things that this program required.
Man.
And so I did that. I got out, and I did pretty good for a little while, but then the first love, second ex-husband, Eric, come back into the picture, the one that introduced me to meth. We got back together, and then he could not stay clean, so I could not stay clean. And I had no idea what had happened in jail.
Right.
So I had no idea how to cultivate my spirit or learn more about whatever it was. I just had no idea. And so I got back with Eric, and shortly after I was on meth again. My mom passed in 2016, right in the middle of my newfound round 2 of addiction to meth, and we were not on good terms. And so when that happened, I just went way back down, and totally gave into it again. What's crazy in the middle of all that is that Operation Educate needed a reentry specialist. And so they offered me this job. Y'all, this was just humiliating. They offered me this job. I took the job. I thought the job was my dream job at the time. And it was. I was going to go back into Spartanburg County and help these guys get into the same program that I had gotten into, and get them into rehabs and find them jobs and transportation and all this stuff. And they gave me this job, and I was right in the middle of an addiction. And so I literally destroyed $175,000 grant that Spartanburg County got for this program that I had graduated from. The guys would get out of jail, and I was living in a motel because I had finally left Eric again. And they would come to my motel, and we would do drugs together. It's insanity. And so, needless to say, late 2017, they fired me because I had relapsed so bad that it was not I couldn't hide it anymore.
Yeah.
And I was devastated because, like I said, I thought that was that was my calling. That was it for me. That was my dream job, you know? And so, like I said, I was in and out of jail. Well, I went back to jail just a couple months after I was let go of that job, and this was the same jail that I worked for Operation Educate, Spartanburg County Jail. So literally the same officers that I worked beside to help these men arrested me because I stole a pair of flip-flops from the dollar store. Like, it was just mortifying. It was mortifying. And so I go back to jail, and this time in jail I read Battlefield of the Mind by Joyce Meyer. And I realized that what had happened in 2015 was actually an encounter with Jesus. And my whole life was changed. I started reading my Bible here and there. Like, I wasn't like I was like totally wholly devoted yet, but at least I knew what had happened, and at least now I could be like, okay, this is how I grow spiritually or whatever. And so this was truly the beginning of my walk with the Lord. And so when I got out of jail that time, I knew that I couldn't go back to Eric's. I knew that I couldn't go back to the hotel where I was getting high. The Lord literally told me, like, you need to go somehow be closer to your kids. Mind you, my kids are still in Easley with Brian's mom.
Right.
And I was in Spartanburg. So in the middle is Greenville. And so I just felt that he told me that I needed to go to Greenville and become homeless on purpose. And so that's what I did. I went to Salvation Army. I left Eric. I left my job. I left my car. I left like everything that I had in life at that time, which wasn't a whole lot, but it was my life, you know. And so that was hard. To leave somebody you think that you love, to go be homeless. And so anyway, I did that. I went to the Salvation Army in Greenville, and completely sober for the first time in my whole life. And so I'm thinking clear. The Salvation Army pours Jesus into you. So I was learning about Jesus. I was walking to work. So the Salvation Army is about 30 minutes from downtown Greenville. So I would walk back and forth to work. I did that for 9 months, just so that I could be closer to my children and I could like get myself right. I didn't know how. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew that I needed to work and be closer to my youngins. And so I did that, and then I went and talked to my advocate. I don't even need that. Went and talked to my advocate at Salvation Army. And she was like, well, you know, there's this place in Easley where where my children are.
Wow.
Right.
And y'all, literally, Nana lives 2 minutes that way.
Right.
And so it's a great place, whatever. I was like, yeah, sign me up. I don't even care what they do. Like, I just want to be there, you know?
Right.
And so I talked to the intake. And by the way, another thing that the Lord, he just blows my mind, because I go to Salvation Army not like totally scared, not knowing what's going to happen. And there's this lady there named Marsha. Who would literally, like, I worked at a motel cleaning rooms with her when I first got there. And she would make me get up at 6 a.m. and sit at the Salvation Army table. Mind you, I don't know anything about the Gospels or the Bible or anything at this point, but she would literally make me sit there and read her a chapter in the Gospels every single morning. And so by the time I was at Salvation Army for 9 months, by the time I left the Salvation Army, we had just finished John. So like, I got through all 4 Gospels with this lady that I had no idea who she was. But by the end of John, like, I knew without a doubt that, like, Jesus is real, the Bible is real, God is real, and I just wanted more. he had her there. Like, that was his angel waiting on me. And because when I would have got to the Dream Center without that part, I don't think I would have been ready enough to like receive everything that the Dream Center had for me.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know where I was at. Stayed at the Salvation Army though for 9 months, and came to the Dream Center in October of 2019. What's the guy's name that works at Salvation Army?
Oh man. Yep.
Easley Salvation Army.
Yep. He retired like a year and a half ago.
Jim Abbott.
Jim Abbott. Yeah.
Okay. So Jim Abbott, who works at the Easley Salvation Army, would literally come from the Easley Salvation Army to the Greenville Salvation Army, bring me to the Dream Center or to Pickens Behavioral Health or whatever it was that I needed to do to get into the Dream Center, and then take me all the way back to Salvation Army.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he was still doing that when I first started working here.
What? Like, that's crazy. People don't do that.
It is crazy.
People do not do that. And so, like, I just feel like coming to the Dream Center was God directed me, every step of the way. And so I came here and I stayed for a year and I totally rebuilt my life.
Mm-hmm.
I focused on my children and God, and fell deeply, madly in love with Jesus. And today, I get to work at the store.
Mm-hmm.
I have my children back in my custody. So we all three live in a home that I bought after transitional housing at the Dream Center in Anderson. I'm a member of New Spring Church. I still do recovery. Every week I go to Regeneration Through Grace Church. And I'm going to Liberty University to get my biblical counseling degree. So the Lord he's just done it all. It's God. It's the Lord.
I know you talked for a long time, but I feel like, I don't know, like,
I'm
sorry.
so glad you're emotional.
Oh yeah. Yeah, obviously just knowing you for the last 3 years and like hearing so many of these stories. I mean, I've heard your story in bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Over the last 3 years, but some of it is just so, like, we talked about it beforehand, and people who've listened to this have heard me say it a bunch too, but like, when you see the reality of Revelation 12, like, every time you said something more that you put behind you, I'm just like, I mean, the devil's getting punched in the face over and over just by,
I hope so.
like, boy, like what the Lord has redeemed in your life. And it's just so beautiful. I'm so grateful. And it's also just like shocking to sit here and like to know you and have this friendship with you to where I'm like, I don't know anything but like laugh loud, smile. Like, I don't know anything of Destiny but that. And like watching your boys, like, we go to the same church, and so watching Landon at Fuse and like watching him at summer camp this year and just seeing him like full of life and being crazy and at other camps all summer. It's just like this life that you get to live now because of what Jesus did. It's just, it's so beautiful, and it's like, it's borderline shocking to like hear some of the other stuff. It's just like, you can write a movie script that I would believe is real.
And to watch Landon and Kieran's just a little more private about things, I think, and he doesn't really know yet. But that's the beautiful part, is that like it's generational.
It is.
Like I became an alcoholic like my dad. I cheated on my husbands like my mom, like all these things. But the beautiful part is that it gets to be generational, and now my boys get to carry that and lead their families, because I came to a program who showed me all that, and because the Lord just loves us.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
And kind of cool to see how much the Lord's had his hand on you for so long.
Yeah.
Kept keeping you safe, and, even though you might not have known him or, at the time, but he was still just very much present and like working things out and redeeming on the back end of everything. So I think that's very kind of the Lord.
It's beautiful.
Not only did I not know, I I rejected him,
Right.
you know? Like, it's just, it blows my mind. He doesn't have to do anything.
Right.
And he just pursues and pursues and pursues until you're just his.
Yeah. And once you reach the reality of like every wrong and every, like, he's already taken care of it. And so it's like, once you choose to be with him and to follow him and to love him, like you said, like, it immediately, though it may not be easy at first, like, you start to see how it's like, okay, all this stuff actually is taken care of.
Yes.
I just have to get out of my own way and
Right.
like actually let his blood like wash over me
Right.
and take care of these things. And so it's just, oh man.
And, you know, even now, like, as you know, I'm walking through a separation,
Mm-hmm.
Divorce soon.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, to just be able to cling to the Lord and lean on him and walk in his strength and not my own. Like, I've literally had to do that for the last 8 months.
Right.
But he's there and he's present and he's for us, and he has just like you said, he has everything worked out and planned out, and we just have to submit.
Yeah. Right.
You know?
It's beautiful. Ultimately,
Yeah.
just makes the human experience worth it, and not
Yeah.
not just seeing bleak and like it's, you know, just pointless. And so it's so beautiful.
I think your story also points to, even though when you meet Jesus and you become a Christian, your life doesn't necessarily poof magic at rainbows.
right.
No.
Everything gets happy and better all the time. Like, there is still
it's true.
heartbreak and loss, pain and rejection.
Yes.
But I like what you said, like, at the beginning of your story, you said, like, at the time I didn't know God. But when you do know God, you have that sense of like peace when things get bad. That's, I know it's so cliche. Everyone's like, oh, it's unexplainable. It's unexplainable. No, but like, it
Truly
really
it
is
is.
unexplainable.
It really is.
It is.
And I think your story shows perfectly what it looks like to be faithful and rely on the Lord in a very much like peaceful demeanor while everything is going wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that makes people ask question of like, why is she acting like that? Why does she like still show up to work with a smile on her face, but like mean it, not hiding, but meaning it? Like,
it's
what's
true,
different about Destiny, you know?
Yeah.
And I think even just simply you just existing in the pain and working through it shows the Lord's love more than anything,
it's
really.
crazy.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And obviously it's had a huge impact on us. I'm sitting here like, okay, Sarah's going to have to wrap this thing up because I cannot talk. I just need to have a good cry. So I'm thankful that like that's what a testimony is for, is to, I mean, I've known Jesus my whole life and I've gone through hard things, but even this, like, I'm sitting here like, I would never doubt that he is not real. Like,
Yeah.
regardless of how strong your faith is, like the things that we get to walk through and shared experiences and the testimony that he gives us, like there's a purpose for. He's not just.
That's right.
He doesn't just let these things happen and then he's like, all right, well, you know, it's just for you. Like, no. Like, this is to build faith and to bring glory to him and what he can do. And I'm just so thankful.
Nothing is wasted.
No,
Nothing.
not a thing. So, but I mean, yeah. I'm super thankful. Thank you for sharing and for doing this, and I'm grateful that you're like one of my favorite people on this planet. And
It's true.
Thank you, Brady.
He really,
it's true.
really
I talk about you all the
It's
time.
true. I mean, we both do, but
secrets out.
Yeah.
You know, the whole world knows. Hey, I love Destiny a whole lot.
You're crazy.
But it's
but no,
true.
like, you feel it. Like, even just one more thing, and I'll shut up. But like, whenever you come from the mud, is what I just say. Whenever you come from the mud, like I did, like, you never feel quite good enough. Like, you never feel like, I never feel like I'm as good as you, Sarah, because you're Sarah and I'm Destiny. But so thank you for loving me.
Well, we do, and we
you're
believe
easy
in
to
you.
love. So easy to love. Yep.
Yeah,
Even
literally.
Tony's back here. Yeah.
Tony's back here like, everybody loves
so
me.
easy to love.
But I mean, So just thank you again for doing this and saying yes, and we love you a whole lot. So
Love you guys too.
amazing.
It was an honor.
Yeah. So, well, with that, we're gonna wrap up this episode of this week, and we'll see you on the next episode of Stories of Hope.